There was no hint of any trouble coming up at all.
At least not till high school. During her junior year, 17-year-old Frances entered and won a national writing contest. Her winning essay was entitled, God Dies, from historian Conrad Lane.
People were outraged because here was this young high school girl who was saying, literally, there is no God. And you didn't say things like that back in 1931 and get away with it.
In the spring of 1935, 21-year-old Frances won another contest.
She entered an essay contest, which she won, and the first prize was a visit, all paid, to the Soviet Union.
Farmer's mother, Lillian, was furious at Frances for accepting a trip to communist Russia, and she accused her daughter of being a traitor to America. Frances went anyway. She had a plan. Eric Berggren wrote the screenplay for the 1982 feature film Frances, which starred Jessica Lange.
On the way back from Russia, she planned to stay in New York and start her acting career in New York.
After 3 months in New York chasing her Broadway dream, 21-year-old Frances was discovered by a talent scout for Paramount Pictures. But Frances was reluctant to leave New York. Actress Susan Blakely portrayed Frances Farmer in the 1983 TV movie Will There Really Be a Morning?
But this was all the pressure from her mother, and her mother was so manipulative and controlling that she did end up coming to Hollywood.
In 1935, on her 22nd birthday, Frances Farmer signed a 7-year contract with Paramount Pictures.
Totally unknown, nobody in 1935, the fall of 35. In 1936, Come and Get It was released. Boom, she's a major star.
Mama, how would you like to go to Chicago to work?
I'd be scared to be in Chicago alone.
I'd be there. You'd like that, wouldn't you?
You being a married man and all, people think it was funny.
Frances was hot, and to keep the spotlight on her, the press agents at Paramount encouraged Frances to date a handsome actor named Leif Erikson. But the plan backfired when Frances went against the studio's wishes and married Erikson on February 8, 1936. You see, a sexy leading lady was supposed to be single. The outraged execs at Paramount were determined to make Frances act like a movie star.
She hated the makeup. She hated the plucking of the eyebrows. She did not like it. She felt like a puppet.
She only had one thought in mind, and that was to get to the New York stage. And in the following year, 1937, she finally made it. She went to New York and joined the group theater and appeared in a very, very popular play called Golden Boy.
But trouble began when 24-year-old Frances started fooling around with Golden Boy playwright Clifford Odets. He was married. Don't forget, so was she.
Clifford Odets did not treat her too well, and she became devastated as a result of this affair.
When it came time for the London run of Golden Boy, they wouldn't let her go to London because they got an actress who was financing the production in London. And that was part of the deal, that she'd get to play the part of Lorna Moon.
Frances got dumped from the play and by the playwright as well.
The only reason she knew that she was no longer going to be with him was he wrote her a one-line telegram saying, I believe, as I recall, was, my wife returns from Europe. Best of luck.
Sadly, Frances Farmer needed all the luck she could get. 27-year-old actress Frances Farmer returned to Hollywood. Still under contract to Paramount Pictures, Frances worked on several mediocre films. Her marriage to actor Leif Erikson was pretty much over, but frankly, that was the least of her troubles. See, Frances also developed a problem with booze and pills.
Frances was a large girl, and she tended to put on weight. So they gave her pills to help her keep the weight off. And I think she probably was an alcoholic, or turning into one at that point. And the pills and the alcohol became a real lethal combination. Add a car into it, and a cop, and things happen.
And boy, did something happen on the night of October 19th, 1942. 29-year-old Frances was driving down Pacific Coast Highway in the so-called dim-out zone. It was during World War II when drivers were required to turn their headlights off.
She was driving with her lights on, and having been at a party, she'd had a few drinks. And the police pulled her over, and this nasty, nasty scene ensued.
How nasty? Well, when the officers asked her profession, she replied, whore.
And this was the beginning of a series of scenes that eventually got her incarcerated, labeled insane, which she probably wasn't.
Well, in January 1943, 29-year-old Frances made headlines once again. She was living here at the Knickerbocker Hotel in Hollywood, on probation after her last brush with the law. Farmer was starring in a low-budget film called No Escape. a fitting title considering.
She was on the set of a film she was doing at Paramount, and she took a hairbrush and threw it at her hairdresser and cracked her in the skull with it.
Apparently, the hairdresser filed charges because suddenly, in the middle of the night, Frances was dragged out of her hotel room by the police.
And they came for her at the Knickerbocker and carried her out, dragging me, kicking and screaming.
Frances had violated her probation and was arrested for assault. But instead of jail, Frances was sent to La Crescenta Psychiatric Hospital.
He was probably arranged by the studio and her agent at the time, and it was a, good way to get her out of publicity for a while.
After 8 months in the psychiatric hospital, Frances escaped. And with nowhere else to go, she headed back to Seattle and her mother Lillian. Big mistake. Lillian tried to convince her daughter to return to Hollywood to resume her film career. Frances argued that she felt as trapped and stifled in Hollywood as she did in the hospital. This made no sense to Lillian.
Her mother looked at it like, how can you be so stupid? You could be famous.
One particular argument, Frances had something in her hand, some kind of a kitchen utensils, and she started to make kind of a gesture which you could interpret as threatening. And I remember my Lillian, I said, you do that, you're going to go right back. You'll go right back there. Put that away.
The feuding between mother and daughter escalated over the next several months. Lillian's threats finally turned into action.
Frances Farmer, traipses down the stairs, and there's the man with the straitjacket for her, and she is hauled off. There was no way that she was going to go to any asylum, because she wasn't crazy.
31-year-old Frances was taken to Western State Hospital in Washington, also known as Steilacoom, on May 5, 1945. Stephen Jaffe produced the television movie about Frances Farmer.
And how she survived what she went through is, it's almost impossible to even imagine. By the time she was in Steilacoom, her life was shattered.